the final sort of 10 minutes, I'm going to hand over to James Farrow, who's a co-founder and director at Curium Solutions. So works very closely with Andy Dawson, who I'm sure lots of you will know, and the rest of the team there. Curium have been partners with us on Growth Through People. I think this is the third year now. So they've been there for the full sort of journey, and again have worked with us very, very closely to adapt as we've taken the conference digital. I'm going to leave this to you, James, and I know you're sort of the parting piece is going to be around challenging everyone here about what are we going to be doing differently. So I'm going to step away. I'll let you deliver the last sort of 10-minute session, and then I'll just pop back up right at the end.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, Paul. Yeah, as you say, I've been listening since this morning, and like a lot of you out there, it's just been brilliant, right from the word go with Stephen, with what he was talking about with Big Issue, and the theme resilience that carried on almost throughout the whole day that kicked off at the start. But the key question for me with anything like this, everyone's giving up time, everyone's giving up effort and energy to put this on, the brilliant event. But the point is, what difference is it going to make? And the reality is that nothing really changes unless people take action. Now, one of the things that really fascinates me, and we've been teaching a lot of Curium for the last 10 years or so, is really the psychology of goal achievement. Why is it that sometimes we achieve goals and sometimes we don't? And I'm sure those of you out there would have set some goals that even year after year, you might find yourself at January again saying, oh no, this will be the year when I run the marathon, when I learn French. So I'm going to touch a little bit on some of the psychology, but also challenge you a little bit in terms of what you're going to do differently from some of the ideas and inspiration from today. So Emily, if we can just flick into the first slide. So really, we're going to talk about taking action. There's three key things. I'm going to talk about motivation, know your blockers, and thirdly, accountability. All right. But first of all, I want to start with a question. If we flick onto the next slide, just a question to all of you out there. What comes first, action or motivation? All right. So I often ask this question. So just fire has anybody got any thoughts? Motivation? Yeah, motivation. Motivation, right? Yeah, motivation. Oh, action, right. The vast majority of you are saying motivation. Now, this is quite a challenge, isn't it? Because is that really true? The challenge I always put into this is when you think about when you've been really motivated, if you've ever got into running or cycling or a sport or a hobby, did you start off as motivated as you got eventually after maybe 2 or 3 weeks, maybe 2 or 3 months in, when you really started planning your week around it, really getting into it? The motivation part is a thought process that I'm going to do something, but it's not until we start taking action that we really start to earn the motivation, if that makes sense. And the way these two things link in, so if you flick onto the next slide, it's almost think of these things as this, what we call a cybernetic loop. All right. So action drives motivation. Motivation drives action. Action drives motivation. This is very much when we start talking about the mind and body link. So if you think about mindset and motivation being part of that, being influenced by what we do, by our behaviors, and our behaviors being influenced by our mindset. But if you start to challenge yourself and start thinking, actually, does it have to be motivation that comes first? Because I know a lot of people, coach a lot of people who, if I'm honest, they sit there for day after day waiting for this wave of motivation to wash over them before they get going. Today, do I feel like going for that run? No, it's not happening. So they won't do it. As opposed to working out, just take the action and let the motivation build. All right. So that's the first thing I'm going to leave you with, is just around action before motivation, and the motivation will come and that continuous loop kicks in. Okay. Let's just talk about what you're going to do differently from today. So flick onto the next slide. So just now, just have a think. From all the thoughts and ideas and inspiration from today, what action will you take, or what idea might you implement? What if you thought, actually, I could do something with that? Just take 20 seconds or so, have a think, maybe put some things into the chat box, or just write them down on your own pad. Might be a simple action. It might be actually something you want to implement with your team, something you want to take back to your work environment. Maybe it's something a bit more ambitious than that even. I'll give you a moment just to make a few notes on that. Okay. So we know that that writing these things down from a logical point of view is really straightforward. We write them down, but the point is, will we follow through? Okay. This applies, by the way, to any goals that you set yourself. A lot of these little techniques that I'm teaching you here are just going through with you. So next little technique I'm going to just talk about is know your blockers. So just flick onto the next slide. So looking at the action that you've written, or the goal, or whatever it is, however ambitious it is, we're just going to do a quick pre-mortem on it. So what is a pre-mortem? Now, we've all heard of a post-mortem. So a post-mortem is, somebody's died and we're going back and working out cause of death. All right. Pre-mortem is we're doing the same thing, but before the event. So we're going to look forward 3 months, 6 months from now, and you have spectacularly failed on your goal. Well done. All right. But that's okay, because we're just doing this in our mind's eye at the moment. All right. So we've gone forward and we've massively failed. We haven't taken any action at all. So just flick onto the next slide. So here's a question I'm going to ask you. What is it that's going to stop you? What will get in your way? So what's actually stopped you achieving that goal? We probably know now what those blockers are likely to be. What are the likely things that are going to get in your way? So just make a few notes to yourself, or just a few notes, just even on the chat here. What are the things that get in your way of the goals that you set, or the actions that you commit to? Some of you might write things such as time. I don't have enough time. Time is a very valuable commodity. We've probably got a bit more time now than we've had previously. Being overwhelmed by the scale of a project, absolutely. Focus on short-term reactive stuff rather than the longer term. Yeah, really good. Really good. Yeah. Always prioritizing other things. Yeah. I found other distractions. Yeah. Nice. Yeah. Too reactive. Absolutely. What's interesting is we can know before the event what the blockers are going to be. So what I'm going to ask you to do, not even necessarily now, but also just in your own time, just to have a look at the commitments that you're making from today, the commitments you're making to yourself, and understand the blockers that are going to play out, and have a strategy to deal with some of these blockers. So if it is the scale of the project, break it down to its simplest step. All right. If you're training for a marathon, the very first step actually is probably just buying a pair of trainers. It's that simple. Or even Googling where I can buy trainers. Break it to its smallest step. So we already understand some of those blockers, so we can have strategies to deal with those as they come up. Procrastination, absolutely. Flick onto the next slide. I mean, when we talk about where the blockers really happen, it's mainly psychologically. It's the emotional blockers. And there's really only two emotions that stop you from doing anything. Apathy-based emotions and fear-based emotions, and it's quite interesting how these play out. Apathy-based emotions are, it's just not important enough. I'm always going to prioritize something else over this. If the dishes need to get washed, I'll prioritize that rather than do this. Right? I'm always finding something. And the fear-based emotion, even if I'm motivated, if I have fear, it takes a tiny amount of resistance to stop me in my tracks. So this is feelings of uncertainty, presence of doubt, fear of failure. Well, if I don't set any goals, and some people will say this to me, I don't set goals because then I can't fail at them. And it's almost like a bit of a double-edged sword. Well, if you don't do that, you're not going to achieve the things you really want to achieve. So these are the two emotions that we're playing with, but we can have strategies in place to deal with those. Okay, so I just wanted to bring that type of stuff to your attention. The final thing then, so we've covered the first two things that we've covered, all right? So the first one is, action before motivation. The second one is around knowing your blockers, so you can put strategies in place. And the third one then, if you can just flick to the next slide, is around accountability. And what I want you to do is to think about who is your accountability partner. Right, very quick question that I ask a lot of audiences is this. I ask everyone to stand up or just do a vote, as you can now. Do you trust yourself? So if you trust yourself, just type yes, right? Do you trust yourself? Most people say, totally. Yes, absolutely. We all trust ourselves. Okay. Interestingly, if I flip that on its head and I ask this different question, I'm now going to give you a definition of self-trust. So this definition is Covey's definition, Covey Jr., this is. And his definition of self-trust is this. Every time you make a commitment to yourself, you keep it. Every time you make a commitment to yourself, you keep it. So that's, I'm going to get to the gym, or I'm going to go for that run, do that exercise, make that phone call, wash the car. So on that definition, do you trust yourself? No, no. And it's quite interesting, right? Because we judge ourselves and our intentions, but what's interesting is when we start to look at, where we let ourselves off very easily. But here's the other interesting thing is that if we commit to somebody else, I'll meet you at the gym, I'll meet you on the corner for our 6 o'clock run in the morning. Are we more likely to follow through if we commit to someone else? And very often we are. So accountability partner is, who are you going to send a quick email to, a text to, have a chat with, and just say, listen, sounds silly, I've got this action that I've committed to doing. Can you be my accountability partner once a week, maybe, or when we catch up? Just drop me a text, an email, give me a call, we'll have a virtual coffee, and just challenge me. Am I following through? Okay. Because fundamentally, this is all about making a difference. This is all about taking action. And as leaders, we can't make a difference if we don't follow through and take action. Okay, so these little tips and tricks. So just to summarize on the final slide, action before motivation. So we just flick onto the final slide. Action before motivation. The pre-mortem, right? Know your blockers and have strategies for those blockers, and get an accountability partner. As silly as it sounds, it really works. Know yourself, know whether you're going to follow through or not. Okay. You can flick onto the final slide. Now, what I would say from today, all of you, please go make a difference, because for me, today has made a difference. I hope it has for you as well. So whistle stop tour in 10 minutes. And Paul, I guess it's back to you.
Here we go. James, thank you very, very much. That's a fantastic way to end our inaugural conference, and lots of nuggets in there. And I've seen you do these in really compressed time spaces. I've seen you sort of pull it out a bit longer, but I think it's a great way to finish some nice sort of bite-sized chunks for us all to take away. And certainly that mantra, make a difference. What a great one to carry with us. And there's going to be challenges ahead, but if we can all try to make a difference, then collectively just think what we can do. So